Hello and welcome everyone. I'm very happy to invite you and to ask you to join us in commencing with MEI's annual Climate Week event. This year's event is coinciding with the UN World Environment Day that just occurred yesterday. And we have a week-long activities throughout this week of events, several panels commencing tomorrow through the end of the week. But today, very much excited to present and share with you our very esteemed and special guests that have honored us with their presence today from the Qatar Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Today, we will have a keynote presentation provided to us by the Assistant Undersecretary in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change from the state of Qatar, Engineer Ahmed Mohammed Al-Sada. And I'd like to introduce him briefly before he shares with us his keynote presentation. Engineer Ahmed has over 20 years experience in institutional management and projects management, along with the technical expertise in electrical engineering. He joined the ministry as the Director of Environmental Impact Assessment Department in 2011, where he managed the process of improving the department's systems and strategies. Following that, in 2013, he was appointed as the Assistant Undersecretary of the Ministry, where he managed and supervised strategically the different environmental affairs, the environmental affairs sector, which covers different aspects related to the environment in Qatar, such as climate change, pollution control, and biodiversity. Prior to his work in the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Engineer Ahmed Al-Sada held several positions within Mishra Properties, a Qatar Foundation subsidiary, and Qatar General Electricity and Water Corporation. One of the prominent achievements during that period was his vital role in the establishment of Mishra Knowledge Enrichment Center. Educationally wise, Engineer Ahmed Al-Sada has a master's degree in project management from George Washington University and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering from Qatar University, along with multiple professional certificates in environmental, civil, and electrical engineering. Engineer Ahmed Al-Sada, we are so very honored to have you here. Thank you for joining us today to help kick off our annual Middle East Institute Climate Week event. And with that, I will pass it on to you, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me first to convey the warm regard of His Excellency, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and to take this opportunity to express my thanks and appreciation for Mr. Paul Salem, President of the Middle East Institute, for his invitation to attend this event, which I hope will be fruitful and productive. Ladies and gentlemen, a few days ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment in Stockholm, which was the defining moment that made the world recognize the importance of the environment sustainability and the need to consider it as a global issue that requires attention. As we are all aware, the impacts of climate change poses great challenges that affect all the world, especially the developing countries, which although they are large emitters of greenhouse gases, they get affected most by the environmental impacts of global warming. Ladies and gentlemen, this event can be considered as an opportunity for us to cooperate and work together to discuss solutions and innovation to tackle environmental challenges, especially the ones related to climate change. And I would like to point out here some Qatar's national and international efforts in this regard, in order to share with you our knowledge, experience, and ideas that could enhance joint cooperation in the Middle East, which is suffering greatly from the impact and the climate change and does not have capacity to deal with it. Ladies and gentlemen, to face climate change, Qatar has taken the path of synergy and integration between environmental protection requirements and sustainable development, which was guided by Qatar's National Vision 2030, its pillars that focuses on environmental, social, economic, and human development. In the context of Qatar's role as a strategic partner in supporting least developed countries and small island developing states in handling climate change, His Highness the Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani announced during the 2019 UN Climate Action Summit that Qatar will contribute $100 million to least developed countries and small island developing states to address climate change and support them to adapt and build resilience to climate change, natural hazards, and environmental challenges. In recognition of the importance of contribution globally to address environmental challenges, Qatar enacted legislation and laws to preserve the environment and make protection and developing its resources one of its strategic priorities. We also took partial steps towards having a well-defined strategy for economic diversification, supporting sustainable development program, implementing local projects to reduce emission through the utilization of renewable energy and energy efficiency. And as far adaptation to the effects of climate change, we work to enhance our infrastructure and variable areas. All of these plans and initiatives are aimed to address climate change and support Qatar's path towards sustainable development in a way to reflect the aspiration of people of Qatar and the future generation. Last October, we launched Qatar Environment and the Climate Change Strategy, as well as Qatar National Climate Change Action Plan, which can be considered as the beginning of a new chapter of Qatar efforts to address climate change and a key roadmap to achieve the environmental development pillars of Qatar National Vision 2030, which comes in the line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And Qatar ambitions to have a significant role in the region through the implementation of several projects and initiatives that contribute to the efforts of reducing air pollutant and CO2 emissions, along with relying more on renewable energy resources. In addition to that, Qatar submitted its National Determined Contribution Report last August, which represents the country commitment to fulfill the Paris Agreement requirements. At the end, I would like to express again my thanks and appreciation to the organizing of this event and wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Assistant Undersecretary, for these opening remarks. I can't think of a better way to begin our event than to highlight Qatar's efforts and flagship initiatives as they move forward in tackling climate change. And I think this is a great example of what the Middle East is doing to address some of these very critical aspects of climate change that are affecting the region. My understanding is to tell us a little bit more about that will be Mr. Mohammed Omar Bada, who is actually the head of Clean and Sustainable Practices section at the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change under the Climate Change Department. And so he will share with us a little bit more of the details that the Assistant Undersecretary, Engineer Ahmed Mohammed Assada, had provided for us to begin our event today. So if you'll give me a moment, the presentation is loading up, and we will be sharing that with you on the screen here momentarily. So Mr. Mohammed, whenever you're ready, once the presentation is up, please feel free to take it away.
Okay, great. Thank you for the great introduction, Mr. Mohammed, and I'd like to thank Engineer Ahmed Mohammed Sada for his speech. So yes, first of all, good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in Bonn, where I am currently at. As you're all aware, climate change is not it's a global issue and has to be tackled in a holistic manner. So it's my pleasure today to highlight Qatar's special circumstances and the initiatives and plans that we put forward towards achieving our goals. So yes, next please. Yes, so here's a little preview of some of the climate risks that Qatar faces. It poses an enormous impacts on species and habitats, especially for a vulnerable country like Qatar with a very vulnerable environment. Risks to Qatar biodiversity, socio-economy include adverse impacts on food security, tourism and heritage, and water and air quality. Climate risks such as sea level rise, which leads to flooding, endangering biodiversity, which leads to the adverse impact on marine habitats and the extinction of marine fauna, as well as risks to food security, which leads to fishery resource depletion, increase in temperature, which leads to the heat exhaustion, scarcity of power, a scarcity of water, sorry, and impacts on the quality of the desalination plants that the country uses for its water, as well as tourism. And these need substantial adaptation capacities to face these risks. And once again, this is not exclusive. All these risks are not exclusive to Qatar. They are risks the whole world faces as well. Next, please. So here's a little bit of a history of the climate change action that the state of Qatar has taken over the years. So in 2002, an environmental protection law was put into place. A few years after that, in 2008, the Qatar National Vision 2030 was released to the public, and part of it, one of the pillars, was environmental pillar that focused on the state of the environment and how it would be improved by 2030. In 2011, the National Plan for Energy Efficiency Optimization Resource Utilization was announced, and the initial national communication to the UNFCCC. The next year, Qatar became a deep part of the UNFCCC history, and became the host of the COP28 which was conducted in Doha, and it was a turning point for the climate negotiations as it followed up on what was occurring under the Kyoto Protocol. In 2012, also, Qatar launched the Tarshid program and gas flaring reduction programs as targets in the national development strategy, and they were very successful programs in lowering emissions. The intended nationally determined contributions was handed in to the UNFCCC in 2015. 2016, Qatar became a member, signed the Paris Agreement. And in 2019, Qatar built one of the largest facilities of CCS in the region. This year, as many of you know, Qatar will be hosting the first carbon neutral World Cup in November, which is a very big achievement for Qatar and for FIFA as well. There's also the Ministry of Environment became the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change as a show of the importance of climate change to the decision makers here in Qatar. We also put out the National Climate Change Action Plan, the national determined contributions, as Engineer Ahmed Sada mentioned, as well as the National Environment and Climate Strategy. So, please. So, part of the National Vision 2030 was the environmental pillar, and part of that environmental pillar was the balance of between human and economic development, and environmental development as well. So, economic growth and climate protection can be a mutually beneficial relationship for Qatar. Which feels very strongly about protecting the climate and economic growth. The national vision was built around this aspect, and I will expand further in the next slide. Next, please. So, as I mentioned before, environmental development was part of the National Vision 2030, and after that, the National Development Strategy was developed as a way to achieve the national vision. Part of it focused on the sustainable development to preserving the environment, as well as the efficient use of natural resources. 70 and that was the National Climate Change Action Plan further built upon the climate protections that the state of Qatar has put in place. In it, there will find mitigation measures until 2030 and 2050 to reduce carbon emissions. There's a greenhouse gases reduction targets and pathways, as well as adaptation measures reacting to the physical risk of climate change, as well as enablers to drive the change. All of that as well not only encompasses climate change, but 17 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 from the United Nations. Next slide, please. So economic diversification is a very important part of these national plans. The NCCAP, the National Climate Change Action Plan, covers both adaptation and mitigation measures. And economic diversification is at the intersection of both. A few examples on mitigation are renewable energy, CCS, carbon capture and storage, energy conservation, and electrification of vehicles. From the adaptation side, so enhanced water recovery from desalination plants, enhanced vegetable production, increasing the awareness on sustainability, and the adaptation measures with mitigation co-benefits, such as financial incentives for electric car utilization. To achieve all of that is included to achieve the economic diversification goals, which are one of the National Vision 2030 objectives. Next slide, please. So this is a preview of some of the things that can be found on the NCCAP, which is available online if you want to explore it even further and read the whole document. So it provides 36 specific mitigation measures and more than 300 adaptation measures owned by various stakeholders covering the oil and gas, transportation, power and water, as well as other measures of building, construction, industry, all these mitigation measures will result in a 25% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 over business as usual, which is communicated through our updated nationally determined contributions. The measures are of quick win type with no major changes. Some require incremental modifications and few require structural changes of policies with specific enablers are in place. And this work was done in collaboration with many national stakeholders from all of the sectors that I have mentioned. Next slide, please. So Qatar has a strong focus on adaptation measures to reduce the impact of climate change on the ecosystem. Implementation of adaptation measures is well advanced, driven by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Few examples of select adaptation measures to make climate change impact cover the economy, infrastructure, healthcare, biodiversity, and food security. Next slide, please. Here's a list of some of the mitigation measures that are included in the NCCAP. Qatar already initiated several mitigation measures across all sectors to reduce its emissions and combat climate change. Top 5 major mitigation measures are provided, and I will highlight the CCS target as the first one in oil and gas. It's recently raised from 5 million tons to in excess of 11 million tons of CO2 annually in the country by 2035. In power and water sector, 800 megawatt solar PV plant is under implementation. And in the electrification of vehicles, Qatar is planning to electrify 25% of its electric buses. Next slide, please. So for awareness, so there's incentives and legislations which we see as a necessary tool to ensure successful implementation of the mitigation measures. There are some of those are mentioned, such as campaigns that target specific groups about technologies, and targeting groups and involving the groups that are targeted the implementation, research and development, and education. Some of the incentives are subsidies that include implementing interest-free loans and tax breaks for green technology. Funding is off grants, ramp-up programs to fund technologies, and specifically green technologies. Next slide, please. So the nationally determined contribution starts as with 2019 as the reference base year, with the target year being 2030. Some of the sectors covered: economic diversification and adaptation measures with mitigation co-benefits, energy, which include transport and downstream industries, building and construction industry, water management, waste, and infrastructure. Emission reduction ambition is the reduction of 25% greenhouse gas emissions from the year 2030 relative to business as usual scenario. The business as usual scenario starts 2019 and considers mitigation measures implemented by the state of Qatar until the end of 2019. The NDC scenario represents a deviation from business as usual, accounting for implemented and planned measures for the period of 2020 to 2030. This was submitted in 2021 at the Glasgow COP, and The GHG emission reduction is expected to achieve the three greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, and N2O. And the 2006 IPCC guideline methodologies will be adopted for reporting. Next slide, please. So the National Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Qatar has developed the National Environment and Climate Change Strategy with 5 priority areas. Priority 1 is greenhouse gas emissions, which, as I talked about before, aims for a 25% reduction. Part 2 is biodiversity, and it aims at conserving more than 25% of land area. Priority 3 is water, and which aims at 5% of desalination by reverse osmosis technology. Priority 4 is circular economy and waste management. Aims to reduce 50% recycling, which aims at achieving 15% recycling of municipal waste, along with other goals as well. Priority 5 is land use, and it aims at 50% improvement in farm productivity from 2019 level. All of these priority areas, I only mentioned some examples of the targets, and there's more goals that are included in the strategy. It is also available online for anyone who would like to read it. Next slide, please. So I'll talk about Q&E, the strategy, the environment, Qatar National, the Qatar Environment Climate Change Strategy. Priority 1 focuses on GHG reduction, which will provide support to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable clean energy, Sustainable Development Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, and SDG 13, climate action. And the initiatives are energy efficiency, CCS, as mentioned before, that the target is raised to 11 million tons by 2035 instead of 9 million tons by 2030. Renewable energy, electrification of road transport, improving the fuel economy in the aviation sector, and nature-based solutions as blue carbon projects. Next slide, please. So for the next plan of action, Qatar is working on national communication submissions, which submission to the UNFCCC, which covers greenhouse gas inventory, national circumstances, mitigation and adaptation actions, finance, technology, and capacity building requirements and support. The biannual update report, biannual transparency report after 2024 submission to the UNFCCC, implementation of an MR measurement, review, and verification system at a national level to track greenhouse gas emissions and projects participating in COP and IPCC meetings. And I would like to talk a little bit about some of our work, not just on climate change, but as well on the green growth and green economy as well, because Qatar last year has started cooperating with the Global Green Growth Institute to help further develop that sector of work and become a leader in green economy and green growth in the region. And that office aims at supporting the government and building the capacity towards national towards integrating green growth throughout the national plans that are developed by the state of Qatar. Next And that's it for the presentation. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Muhammad Al-Bada. I really, I think our audience, myself included, really appreciate being able to discuss in more detail Qatar's, not just the vision, right? So a lot of times you hear a lot of nations or initiatives that are focusing on the outcome. But what I'm glad that you shared with us today is not just the vision, which is how things begin, but actually the actions that the state of Qatar is putting into place, and not just have put into place. So this is very, very encouraging, and to me serves as a great example of what the Middle East is doing in terms of nations, obviously in this case specifically for the state of Qatar, and very detailed steps of action. In fact, I think what I suspect most everyone is going to do is going to search after you've shared this information, are going to go online and read all of this documentation that you've just very briefly highlighted. I'm sure there's even more nuance available online in terms of the information. So I really, really appreciate that. In terms of just sort of to kind of tee people off towards looking for this information in terms of the climate action plan. What are you've mentioned some of the sort of overall perspectives, but in terms of expectations for the state of Qatar, in line certainly with there's a few big things happening in the region affecting certainly this year and next year. The COP meetings are going to be in the Middle East and Egypt this year, which I suspect will focus more on adaptation, and then next year in the UAE, which I think will have more of a Gulf sort of facing perspective, I think, in terms of mitigation. And then certainly towards the end of this year, where Qatar is hosting the first Middle Eastern World Cup, which I think is a sense of pride for all of us in the region. How, I guess it's sort of a broad question, but how can folks, people that are looking, be able to, number one, access a climate action plan and then follow along in terms of the progress? Is there an expectation for the state of Qatar to periodically push out maybe reports or presentations, or in terms of reporting on the progress? Is there things planned for the state of Qatar to share?
Yes, absolutely. So part of the National Climate Change Action Plan is we submitted the National Determined Contribution to the UNFCCC. And this report is going to be updated constantly with with the goals that were mentioned. So in the first one, when we submitted it to the UNFCCC, it was about, it mentioned the big goal is just reducing 25% by 2030. And then the next one will be explaining more and more how we're achieving that. There's also the biannual transparency report, which we will start submitting to the UNFCCC fairly soon. So all of this is new, and it's not new to us, but we are working on it for the first time. We are learning more and more every day what we can do, what are the possibilities. When we first started, I'll be a little bit honest, when we started it was very, very hard, but the more people learn about what we're trying to do, the more we teach stakeholders how important climate change is, not just to the state of Qatar, but to everyone around the world, and to them as well. That it's a benefit for everyone when we work together and become as transparent as possible. It's why we took the bottom-up approach for these all these strategies that I have mentioned. We worked from the start with stakeholders from all sectors. Our doors were open to anyone who wanted to be part of the work, and that's how we were able to reach such a ambitious reduction goal. It's we did not just say reduce by X number and then no. It's how we worked together to towards this achievement because we know that this is a very important issue that will affect the future as well. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
No, this is perfect because I think you touch on one point that is important for people to recognize is certainly in this example with the state of Qatar is that these things appear to have happened overnight, but at the same token, there was a lot of diligence, as you said, the bottom-up approach. It wasn't just a proclamation or vision. There was actual analysis and work behind it that led to these real actions and goals that are achievable, right? That's the important part. But also recognizing how much work happened in such a short time, which is, I think, just a testament to the initiatives and the effort put forth. And I would encourage everyone to read up more on what you presented today. And I suspect we would love to continue to have a dialogue with the ministry as we go forward to focus on all of these different plans. There's so many things you mentioned today that we only got to take a flavor, a taste of all of them, but we would very much love to, at some point as work progresses, certainly moving forward on to highlight that. So thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Omar Badr. I guess I'll turn it over to just as any final thoughts or words from Assistant Undersecretary Engineer Ahmed Mohammed Assad. Is there anything you'd like to share with us before we sort of formally conclude this portion of today's presentation?
No, I would like to thank Engineer Mohammed Omar Al Badr and his presentation, and show us all the participants here with us how Qatar they are going to develop his national vision and the action plan for the climate change. And as he mentioned in his presentation, and he mentioned also that regarding the World Cup, he's part of the team that they are participating for all the stakeholders to put a very strong action plan for the climate change. And this is, as we mentioned, this is like an ambitious for Qatar. Now, just to start the new chapter for us, as we said. Again, I would like to thank you for hosting us today, and thank for everybody for to listen for us.
I think I speak for everyone that it's been our absolute pleasure. We're so very delighted that you're able to join us today, not just to join us, to help kick off this very important event for Middle East Institute, obviously for myself included, but I think just to share in a level of detail that I think a lot of the audience may not have had the chance to on all the work, all the progress that the state of Qatar is doing in this particular area as it relates to climate change, the environment, and achieving a greener future. So I'd like to thank you both so very much. We're so very honored and pleased to have you with us. With that, I will just highlight a few things coming up, as it mentioned, and I forgot to mention this at the front end. So I'm Mohammed Mahmoud. I'm the Director of the Climate and Water Program at the Middle East Institute. And just for our audience, just to remind you that this week we have more events coming. This is an excellent start to our event. Tomorrow through Thursday, we will have a series of panels. Tomorrow's panel is focused on the future of resilient cities and looks at locally led adaptation, which some of the stuff we've heard today from the presentation from the state of Qatar. Following it on Wednesday, we will have a panel on disaster preparedness. How can nations in the Middle East prepare for extreme events, extreme weather events? We've been experiencing that in the region most recently. We'll dive into that. And then finally, on Thursday, we're going to have a panel on the state of climate activism, highlighting prominent voices in that arena. And actually, I'll just mention maybe as a great connection, The moderator of that panel is Nishad Shafi, Qatar's very own young leader and voice that's focusing on climate change efforts. So it's we're starting with Qatar, and in a way we're ending with Qatar. So I'm very excited about that. So thank you all very much for tuning in. Please check in tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the next panel. And once again, thank you to our esteemed guests from the state of Qatar, the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment. Thank you all, and we will see you tomorrow.
Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you for hosting.